Oh, beautiful geoduck. Look at that.
This isn't what it looks like.
Geoduck looks like, grotesque.
Known for their briny flavour and phallic shape, geoducks can cost up to $30 a pound, double the price of Maine lobster. But 50 years ago, the clams were worth less than 25 cents.
The value of geoduck used to be in pennies a pound. It was not a profitable fishery at all.
So what happened? The simple answer? Asia's booming seafood market. Geoduck harvesting is now a $55 million industry in British Columbia, with most exports going to China, where it's considered a delicacy. And in recent years, it's become a hit on social media too. But with China's slowing economy, is the geoduck industry at risk of losing its biggest market?
I'm getting a little nervous, but that's the risk with the fishing business.
And how did it become so expensive? Traditionally, geoducks were part of the diet of indigenous communities on the Pacific coast of North America. The discovery of large, deep-water geoduck colonies in the Pacific Northwest in the mid-1960s paved the way for the commercial geoduck fishing industry. The clams sold for about 20 cents a pound and were used in chowders or ground into burger meat.
I used to trade a crab fisherman for crab, and he would take my geoduck, the darker geoduck we would trade, and he would use it as crab bait.
But in the 1970s, a Japanese-American exporter had the idea to market the clams in Asia. Soon, wealthy people in China and Japan were buying them up to show off at social events. By the 1980s, Japan was the biggest importer of geoduck.
Japanese people, they love it.
It was in his home country of Japan where chef Hidekazu Tojo tasted geoduck for the first time. Today, Tojo sources all of the geoduck for his Vancouver restaurant from local fisheries.
Very important part is, of course, buy fresh one, live one.
In Japanese cuisine, geoduck is typically prepared as sashimi.
Some people don't like, when I serve to, geoduck, smell too strong, very fishy, they said.
But over 5 decades, Tojo has found different ways to prepare it for customers. Today, he's preparing a geoduck salad.
Okay, I like to keep it fresh, so cut it here. Slowly come up. Clean here, just like this. So we're going to the boiling now. I don't want to boiling too much. Maybe 30 seconds boiling. Then come out. Then you put it, I don't want to cook it, the inside. Then inside still fresh, raw. This geoduck a lot of sand. So you must be wash it very well. Lot sand inside.
Tojo says because of its unique look and flavour, many of his guests weren't interested when he first put it on the menu. But his dishes have won them over.
Before people eating, tastes good. What's this? I said, geoduck. Really? I don't like geoduck usually, but now they love it. And also presentation looks beautiful. People, I wanted to try.
But while Tojo's Japanese geoduck preparations are a hit in Vancouver, the clam's popularity in Japan itself waned in the 1990s following an economic crash. Soon, China took over as the biggest importer of geoduck. In fact, about 90% of what this team harvests today will be sold to buyers in China.
We're headed to Savory Island. Where we're going is actually an enhancement site that the Underwater Harvesters Association set up years ago to help create more stock of geoduck.
Geoducks are rare. They only grow in specific waters along the west coast of North America. One of the hotspots is in Canada, off the coast of British Columbia. Eric Jacobson works with the Underwater Harvesters Association, a non-profit organisation that represents 55 geoduck licence holders in British Columbia.
When I first started, it was didn't know much about geoduck, so it was very much a mentorship type of training where it's time on tools, time in the water.
Today is one of the last harvests of the year.
Generally are shooting for 1,000 pounds a day or more.
Geoduck fishers harvest from both wild and farmed beds. It takes 5 to 7 years for the clams to grow big enough for commercial harvest.
So this site that we're going to in particular was planted in 2013. So these clams are 11 years old and they should be around 1.5 pounds. That's usually around 850 or 900 individual pieces.
Since geoducks can only be harvested by hand, skilled divers are the backbone of the industry. It can take months to learn how to pull the clam from the sea floor.
I guess I did like 1 year and I was like super terrible, and then the next year I was like dramatically improved. When you start, it's hard to get a duck out. You're like digging and not getting it out, but once you fish to like hundreds of pounds, it starts coming out pretty easy.
Travis Paulson has been diving for geoduck for the last 12 years. But they're not so easy to come by. That's because geoducks bury themselves in the ocean floor.
If they're not showing, then you're running around lots and not getting any ducks, and it can be a little frustrating.
Divers use a stinger to pump water into the sand, which uncovers the clam so they can gently pull it out. But James Austin, the president of the Underwater Harvesters Association, says that collecting geoducks isn't the only thing divers have to worry about. One of the most common risks divers face is decompression sickness. This happens when they transition from a high-pressure environment to a low-pressure one too quickly. As a diver moves deeper underwater, nitrogen bubbles collect in their body. They need time to release those before they reach the surface. The diver risks serious injury or even death.
I stopped diving because I got, not just once, but several occasions, decompression sickness. I lost my balance for about a year. I couldn't walk in a straight line. So if it happened to me again, it probably would have been worse and possibly fatal.
To prevent this, divers limit the time spent collecting geoducks underwater.
For the area that we're in right now, 40 feet, they could do 90 minutes, take an hour and a half, and then do another 75 minutes to an hour. The deeper you go, the less bottom time you get.
It's a race against the clock once the geoducks are on the boat. That's because the clams are most valuable when they're still alive.
We used to sell it as a fresh, but not live. And so now it's only a live product.
Once they're on the boat, we'll generally put a cover on them and wet them down with a hose. Just keeps them cool and moist during transport until we get to the truck where they're unloaded and put in a refrigerated truck.
Geoducks are separated and ranked on a grading scale, with A being the best. Several factors affect their grade, like colour and any blemishes or cracks. And of course, size matters.
Generally, you're looking for a nice white shell, nice white meat. You can see that these ones are fairly white. This one's a little darker. You can see the shell here, it's also a little darker, whereas on these ones, it's quite a bit lighter. As they get older, they can start to have different varieties of visually things that are unappealing.
The China market is quite sensitive to the different grades. All the grades have different pricing.
Most of today's harvest will be flown directly to buyers in China as early as tonight.
They're very sensitive to environmental changes, so we have to have climate controlled all the way from the vessel to the truck to the plant. That was a lot of innovation to shipping them to make sure that they arrive healthy and alive. It arrives into the China market alive, and it's good there for about 3 to 5 days in the markets in China.
That refrigeration is pricey. It costs roughly $7.3 million a year to ship geoduck overseas. These transport costs are a big part of the reason the clams are so expensive. In British Columbia, a geoduck costs about $18 a pound. Some high-end restaurants in China sell it for 8 times as much. Since the 1990s, China's love for geoduck, especially during holidays like Lunar New Year, has kept the industry in British Columbia booming.
But we are very dependent on the Chinese market. It's hard to replace that demand. The Chinese economy is got some hiccups right now, and I'm hoping that can get sorted out, but it's definitely, the economy has been not as strong as it used to be in the past, for sure.
With rising unemployment rates and unstable real estate and stock markets, more Chinese households are choosing to save rather than spend on luxury goods like geoduck.
If the economy is slowing, incomes are going to go down, the economic mood is going to go down, and that feeds into the demand for the commodities. The issue here is that China is such a big market that even such adjustment may not be able to make up for the potential decline that we're going to see from China.
The Underwater Harvesters Association says this economic slowdown has caused a downturn in sales of geoduck to China. But shifting demand isn't the industry's only concern. Canada is working to protect its coastal environment through the 30 by 30 initiative, a plan to conserve 30% of the country's coastline by 2030. Part of that commitment is the Northern Shelf Plan, which focuses on establishing marine protected areas throughout coastal British Columbia. James says this could have negative effects on BC's geoduck supply.
It is almost the entire north coast, and it's the most productive areas that we harvest of geoduck. That is the areas that have been targeted to close.
The Underwater Harvesters Association says these regulations could cut off nearly 40% of the harvestable areas and slash the industry's revenue by $20 million.
These are jobs that are relying on the ocean and the land, and those are the areas that are surrounding your coast.
But the Canadian government says these measures can provide better protection for marine species and help them adapt to climate change. Canada's Department of Fisheries and Oceans told Business Insider it has worked with commercial and recreational fishers on the MPA Network Action Plan and will continue to do so once it's implemented.
The reason I support protection is that it is like buying insurance for your business, right? It's painful to pay the premium, but the day you need it, that's when it's the best day, right? So when we talk about protection, it's actually to create resilience and to support the whole system so the industry can be protected when you have shocks.
Shocks like the growing danger from red tides, occurrences when algae in seawater grow out of control and become toxic. This causes paralytic shellfish poisoning, or PSP, in animals that eat algae, like geoduck.
So PSP is something that is actually getting worse in our environment. We've had an area on the west coast of Vancouver Island that has had PSP since June.
When PSP levels are too high, the geoducks are considered dangerous for human consumption and can't be sold. And if red tides become more common, they could limit the supply of geoducks available for sale.
I'm getting a little nervous, but that's the risk with the fishing business.
It's caused issues for the geoduck industry before. In 2014, China imposed a 5-month ban on geoduck from the US after finding high levels of PSP in 2 shipments. The Underwater Harvesters Association now spends $750,000 on PSP sampling every year to prevent this from happening.
it's a big concern for us, and we really try to work around it. We have so much time and effort spent on PSP sampling to ensure that we're not sending anything as contaminated.
But Rashid says the best way to mitigate these environmental issues is to address them at the source.
The way to deal with it is not to insist that you don't need regulation. So they need to combine forces to really try to deal with this. Taking good care of the natural system is crucial. Without the geoduck, there's no show, there's no business, no revenue, no nothing.
And methods like this have worked before. When warming waters and reduced oxygen killed nearly all of Baja California's pink abalone population in 2010, stock from a nearby protected area helped replenish the region's population.
But if it's done well, actually, in the long run and medium term, it is going to support the fishery. So we get that infinity benefit.
As for demand, he says the geoduck industry has the potential to regain its momentum in China.
I don't think China's decline is going to be as deep as that of Japan. Japan really, it was a big burst, So the market can come back also, even in China. So they shouldn't lose hope.
There were positive signs of growth for China in 2024. James is confident that China's economy will fully bounce back and give geoduck a boost there once again.
Once the economy turns around in China, it might not happen overnight, but the economy in China will come back. There's just too many people there.
In the meantime, the association is expanding into new markets, working to build demand outside of China.
We are currently shipping and developing markets into Europe. We've done promotions in Paris, we've done promotions in Holland, we've done promotions in London to raise awareness of Canadian geoduck. So we are working on that. My hope for the future is that we can continue the very good sustainable fishery that we have today.